every time Republicans tried to get an increase in defense, we would in fact have to pay a ransom to the Democrats on the domestic side, wholly aside from the needs of the country. So let's step back and say, what are the real needs of the country right now? They're in the defense part of our expenditures, making sure the Defense Department can deal with the major threats coming from Russia and China, providing assistance for the Ukrainians to defeat the Russians. That's the number one priority for the United States right now, according to most Republicans. That's sort of how we see the challenges confronting the country at the moment. So, admittedly, I'm pretty proud of the fact that with a Democratic president, a Democratic House, and a Democratic Senate, we were able to achieve, through this omnibus spending bill, essentially all of our priorities.
The 109th Support Group of the South Dakota National Guard just mobilized a few days ago to head to Iraq and Kuwait as part of the counter-ISIS mission. And unfortunately, we weren't able to have the activation deployment ceremony because the weather wouldn't permit it in South Dakota this last weekend, but we just want to wish the members of the South Dakota National Guard and this unit the very best and thank them for their service and their sacrifice and for that of their families. And also to just say, I've always said that if you don't get national security right, the rest is conversation, which is why it was so important for us to get the National Defense Authorization Bill across the finish line last week. There are so many provisions in there that are impactful when you live in a dangerous world. And if anything, the events of the last year have taught us we live in a very dangerous world. The B-21 bomber was just unveiled. That is a new bomber, a sixth-generation bomber that puts us as a country in the lead when it comes to long-range strike capability. There are only 3 countries in the world who have strategic bombers, and those are China, Russia, and the United States. Ellsworth Air Force Base in South Dakota is going to be the first home to the B-21 bomber. We're obviously very excited about that for the members, the airmen out there, for the community, for the base. No one could be more deserving of this very important mission. And of course, the Defense Authorization Bill provided a lot of the funding, not only for the continued development and build out of that aircraft, but also for all the infrastructure associated with it when it comes to Ellsworth Air Force Base. And so, again, the Defense Authorization Bill is so critically important to making sure that American men and women in uniform who are tasked with defending, protecting, ensuring the safety and security of people here in the United States and helping defend America's interests both here at home and around the world are funded, and the defense authorization will make sure that they have everything they need to do that job. And so I'm grateful that we got it passed last week. It shouldn't have taken this long. The Democrats always seem to delay the defense authorization bill, but in the end, we got it across the finish line, and that's good for America's national security interest.
Well, I think the number one job of the federal government is to defend the country. It's something that almost every American will admit they can't do for themselves, and almost every state will admit they can't do for themselves. I'm certainly supportive of our long commitment to authorizing how we do that. The Defense Authorization Bill, as Senator Thune pointed out, incredibly important, but the Defense Authorization Bill really doesn't do much if you don't appropriate the money to do what the Defense Authorization Bill says our military and defense objectives are. There are many people in the Congress, both House and Senate, who will always vote for the Defense Authorization Bill and never vote for the bill the money is in to do what the Defense Authorization Bill says we're going to do. All of you know, after 2 decades of being at leadership conferences, House and Senate, that I've said a lot of times, we are doing this in the worst possible way, but the only thing worse than doing it in the worst possible way with this one big bill at the end would be not to do it and kick it to a new Congress that when the Congress starts won't even have a Ways and Means chairman or a budget chairman on the House side or lots of other things. This is no favorite of the House if we kick this to another year, and it makes it impossible to have a chance to get the bill that they are responsible for, the 2024 bill, done in the way it needs to be done. This bill has, increases defense spending by 10%, increases non-defense spending by 5%, with 13.2% inflation since, or 13.8% inflation since President Biden became president. I think we've done a good job of holding the line on the non-defense area and trying to keep the defense area where it keeps up with the defense needs of the country. The money for Ukraine will be in this vote, and we have an obligation. Our number one obligation is to defend the country in the federal government, but I also think we have and need to have an obligation to help people defend themselves and fight for their own freedom. That's in this vote this week as well, and I'm going to do everything I can to see that it passes.
Right before Thanksgiving, I had the opportunity to visit a food bank in southwest Iowa, very close to my hometown of Red Oak. And when I was there, went in, visited with the volunteers and the staff, and as we walked...
Exit.
Leader McConnell.
Yeah.
On permitting reform, you called Joe Manchin's permitting reform permitting in name only. Do you have any confidence that Democrats will support a stronger permitting reform in the next Congress, and we're going to work with the Republican House on this?
Honestly, not really. We've been, this is a huge problem. It's the reason so many projects in this country take forever. And with the massive inflation that we're experiencing, take the infrastructure bill, for example, which I enthusiastically supported. I just wonder how much it'll buy with the passage of time and all the slowdowns in permitting that will inevitably occur during the process. I think real permitting reform is really important, and hopefully there's an opportunity to go forward. Manchin's bill didn't actually achieve it, unfortunately.
Leader McConnell.
Roll with it.
No, I agree.
Third time you're in trouble.
Okay, good afternoon. It's almost evening. I'm sorry I'm late. We had a long, nice caucus. Okay, and I'm glad to be joined by Senators Murray, Stabenow, and our great friend and leader, Senator Durbin came, and Senator Durbin, but our great friend and leader, Senator Leahy. Well, as everyone saw last night and early this morning, things are moving in the right direction. Chairman Leahy and Ranking Member Shelby released a long-sought, bipartisan, bicameral, omnibus appropriations bill at 1:30 a.m. this morning for fiscal year 2023. And after a lot of hard work, this package represents an aggressive and essential investment in American families, American workers, and in our national defense. It will give our troops a raise, it'll make health care more affordable for millions, and it fulfills the promise Democrats made to defend democracy at home and abroad. I particularly want to thank Chairman Leahy and Ranking Shelby for working on this omnibus for months. The bill's a fitting tribute to send off our two esteemed appropriators. If the omnibus goes down as their final legislative contribution as senators, then I say bravo, well done, thank you. The sooner we pass the omnibus, the better, and I'm hopeful no senator will stand in the way of finishing our work before Friday. It's too important to the American people. As you know, there's a big storm coming in the middle of the country on Thursday and Friday, so we'd like to finish this as soon as possible. But we must finish it, of course, by Friday when the government funding expires. Now let's turn to the omnibus itself. The bill's overflowing with good news. One of the most important pieces of this bill is the Electoral Count Act, which will not just reaffirm Democrats' commitment to passing democracy reforms, but it's an important step to preserve our democracy in generations to come. The Electoral College process was flawed, and this makes some very significant corrections. I said months ago we would do everything we could to pass this bill, and now we're following through. The omnibus is going to fill our promise to stand with Ukraine, with our friends in Ukraine, with billions more in emergency economics. On the home front, the omnibus is aggressive, generous, and far-reaching in health care, making it more affordable and more expansive. Patty's going to talk about this, I believe, but people have not followed the amazing changes. This was a really great thing to improve health care of the American people, particularly working-class people, poorer people, including that every child in America who qualifies for Medicaid or CHIP will be guaranteed at least 1 year of continuous health coverage. A lot of the kids, when they turned 19, their health coverage changed. They didn't have continuous coverage for a year, and it got dropped. That was a terrible thing. It was one of our big goals. We will, for the first time, permanently extend a policy from the American Rescue Plan that gives states a full year of postpartum coverage. We've been trying to get that for a long time. That's for moms on Medicaid and CHIP. The omnibus represents also a new offensive battle in the mental health crisis. I really fought hard, along with Senator Stabenow, who will talk about it, to make sure this package will allow seniors to get Medicare coverage for counseling, including funding to train new psychiatrists, create mental health mobile units, instruct Medicare to cover outpatient mental health. We're going to attack the opioid crisis head-on by expanding options for medication-assisted treatment, also make never-before-seen investments in suicide prevention, maternal mental health, pediatric mental health. We're going to make health care more accessible than ever, assuring that Medicare beneficiaries can use telehealth through 2024. This is so important in rural areas. I go to my upstate rural hospitals, and this is their #1 ask. We're also making health care more accessible to, we're also increasing support for rural and low-income hospitals. We're going to keep our promise to veterans. Many of the things that we voted on this summer, we said we had to fund, and we're doing it. We're funding the PACT Act. For manufacturing and science, we secure our first major down payment in tech hubs that we authorized in the CHIPS bill. Largest dollar increase for National Science Foundation ever, including securing a surge of funds for the new Technology Directorate and the STEM workforce. Combined with the investments in the Department of Energy and Commerce, we provide billions with a B to support universities, national labs, manufacturers, entrepreneurs. So I'm talking for a while, there's a lot to celebrate. There's more. Can't stop talking about it because it's so good. We've largest increase in Pell Grants over a decade, $500, it's now $7,395. The ladder up, going to college for poor kids, working kids, gets a little bit easier, okay? We secured billions in homeless assistance grants, billions for rural housing services, over $1 billion for home investment partnership programs, $1 billion for housing in the elderly, $2 billion for child care access. So, it doesn't include everything we wanted. McConnell blocked a lot of things I cared about, like 9/11 health. He just said no at the end, but it's a big step. The bill is a big step in the right direction. From start to finish, the omnibus is made by and for the American people. We got to get it done by Friday. I want to thank my colleagues who work relentlessly to put this piece of legislation together. Thank you to my colleagues. We're going to finish the bill very soon. It's going to be a big step forward for America. Senator Leahy.
Thank you, Leader. I totally agree with everything the Leader has said. You know, we started working on this last summer. I've encouraged as many senators of both parties to come and work with us, talk with us, see what we can do. I'm glad that so many did, and I'm glad that at the end some in the other party did too. I think they know that there are things in here that they've always said back home they want. Well, now they have a chance to vote for it or worse, vote against it. Everybody's been for the PACT Act to care for our veterans. Well, then show that. The omnibus bill does that. You're either for it or against it. The CHIPS Act, I'm for that. I was proud to be for it. I came out of the hospital to sign the bill, the CHIPS Act. I was that proud of it. It's here. Vote for it. The infrastructure law, I don't know how anybody could be against that. It's in here. Show by your vote how you are. Families dealing with the cost of heating, child care, college, housing. So many of the things the Leader mentioned are in there. If you want to fund the troops and their families, vote for this bill. If I spent a career here in trying to protect victims of domestic violence, both adult and child, vote for this bill. The money's in there. I mean, I could go into a whole lot, but let me look at the people that worked on it. Senator Patty Murray is going to be the next chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee. She's come into this thing line by line, knowing exactly what it does. And she has encouraged and brought together others to support it. Senator Stabenow, who's here, is going to have more of a voice on rural America than any of us, as well as large states like hers. She has helped us craft each part of it. The thing I was saying is that for weeks and weeks, actually months and months, way into the evening, weekends and all, senators came together to help, point by point by point. We didn't call press conferences. We didn't do a whole lot of it. We just did the work. Now, I think we have a product we can all be proud of. We can all vote for. Somebody said to me, oh, I didn't get everything I wanted. I said, you know, I think some people only got 95% of what they wanted. I've been here 48 years. I'd call that a pretty darn good victory. And this is a good bill. Thank you.
Senator Leahy got 2 standing ovations, one when he was present and one when he wasn't at our caucus lunch today. Senator Durbin.
Many of your editors and close friends have asked that before you return, you ask how many Article 3 judges have been approved for lifetime appointments by this Congress. The definitive answer today, authoritative answer, is 97. 97. 126 were approved by committee. So we have another 29 which could be called even in the closing minutes if there's an agreement on the floor. But we're proud of the 97. In comparison, in the first 2 years of my friend Barack Obama's presidency, 43. The first 2 years of the Trump presidency, 85. So we've done an extraordinary job in the Judiciary Committee with an evenly split committee. And it called for bipartisan cooperation many times. And we've been able to bring that cooperation to the floor because we have diversity in the ranks of these new judges, and every single one of these judges was judged well qualified by the American Bar Association. That was not the case during the last 4 years. There's more work to be done when it comes to the judges that are held over. We'll do our best to move on it in an expeditious way. One last point I want to make to you, this omnibus bill has many, many, many provisions. There's one in particular that I'm proud of that Senator Bill Cassidy and I put together. Have you ever bought anything on the internet? I'll bet you have. What's the likelihood that what you bought was stolen or counterfeit? Unfortunately, it's a very high likelihood. Now we're going to have disclosure of the actual sellers on the internet. This is at the request of retailers across America who were being looted and stolen from, and their products were sold on the internet. Now finally, we're going to have a requirement of disclosure of those sellers' identities so we can catch those that are fencing stolen goods or selling counterfeit goods. It's just one of the features of an omnibus bill that has many good features.
Senator Murray, as I mentioned, did an amazing job on health care that most folks don't know about, so please pay careful attention.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Leader. Thank you to all of you. And, you know, this end-of-the-year funding deal package is a very big deal. Funding the government, what does that really mean? Well, for students who are struggling to cover tuition or rent, it means making ends meet just got a little bit easier. We worked with our Republican colleagues to increase the Pell Grants by $500. That is the biggest increase in a decade. For workers who are fighting for a safe workplace, better benefits, and the ability to form a union, it means better protection for their rights because we included a long overdue funding increase for the National Labor Relations Board. For parents who are struggling to find quality, affordable childcare, it means help is on the way. We increased childcare funding by a third with a bipartisan $1.85 billion increase for our federal child care program. It's not everything we wanted, but believe me, you've heard me talk about child care many times, but this is a badly needed lifeline for providers who are struggling to stay open and parents who are trying to find affordable child care and keep their heads above water. Democrats understand how we spend these dollars. That is a reflection of our values, which is why we fought for these investments, along with increases in funding for everything from public schools, mental health, public health systems, workforce development and apprenticeships, substance use disorder prevention and treatment services, and a lot more. I'm especially proud that in addition to the funding, we were able to include many of the bipartisan bills that my colleagues and I on the Help Committee negotiated. The Bipartisan Prevent Pandemics Act to overhaul and strengthen our pandemic preparedness efforts and response, from strengthening our supply chains to setting up a mission control center at the White House, is in this package. A bipartisan FDA reform package to put patients over companies' bottom lines, and for the first time ever, to empower FDA to finally conduct oversight of cosmetics. We have a bipartisan mental health and substance use disorder package in this that supports states as they tackle fentanyl and a worsening opioid crisis. It strengthens the new 988 suicide lifeline and provides resources to support youth and maternal mental health. And it includes a bipartisan retirement savings bill with a set of reforms to expand access to retirement plans and help more families save for a rainy day. Now, I just said bipartisan a lot, and that's because we are getting a lot done, because we sat down to really negotiate these issues like families sent us here to do, because we focused on fighting these crises, not fighting each other. I hope we can now get this across the finish line as soon as possible, and that we continue this approach as we work to tackle the urgent challenges that our nation is facing. And I should note, there is one more key reason this bill is so strong. Senator Leahy. Let me just say, he's been a champion for families as Appropriations Chair. On days like this, announcing important progress like this, it is clearer than ever how much we will miss him. Thank you.
And Senator Stabenow really, against all odds, got made permanent the idea of feeding poor children summer nutrition. In the past, when school ended, these kids were down and out.
Thank you. Well, first of all, as we've said a lot of times, it's been a busy 2 years. We've gotten an awful lot done in the last 2 years, and now today you're hearing about a really significant bill that we will be ending the year with, the omnibus and all that has gone with that. We've sent out today a summary of what we have done in the last 2 years as Democrats, and it didn't even include what we're talking about today in terms of the omnibus. So this is very, very significant. And basically what the belief we've had is that the American people deserve a government that works to lower their costs and help businesses create good-paying jobs and make our community safer. And that's really the context in which we have been focused, and we've been doing that. Let me just stress again that we're standing up to Big Pharma to bring down prescription drug costs, and in just 12 days, 3.2 million people on Medicare who use insulin will have their insulin capped at $35 a month. This literally is going to save people money and save lives, and we're just 12 days away. We've lowered health care premiums, and thanks to so many actions that we've already taken, plus what we are doing now, more Americans have affordable health insurance than at any other time in our country's history. More people have affordable health insurance. This is a big deal. We've been standing up to big oil to reduce the cost of filling up your gas tank and heating your home. We've helped businesses create over 10.5 million new jobs in the last 2 years, and we've made communities safer, whether it's getting shots in arms, funding our local police and fire departments, or making historic investments in mental health. And as Senator Schumer said, part of this now is a major effort that we've been able to do through the Finance Committee as a part of this. I want to thank Senator Daines, my partner on the Health Subcommittee, for the work we've done on mental health workforce. We've done great investments in new funding of community services, but we need the people. We need the social workers. We need the therapists. We need the psychiatrists to be available to make those services actually happen. And there are major steps in this bill to do that. And I would finally say that I want to thank Senator Bozeman for being my partner on the Agriculture and Nutrition Committee to put into law a commitment to feed low-income children in the summer. And to have that be something that is ongoing. It's something I think we should all feel very proud about in terms of an American value. We worked very hard for the people of our country. We've gotten a lot done, but frankly, we're just getting started. So happy holidays and on to 2023.
Thank you. Yes.
Can you just give us an update on the amendment situation, but more importantly, veterans groups are angry that the Afghan Adjustment Act was left out of this due to GOP objections. Will you try to add it as an amendment?
Okay, look, we're working to get this bill done as quickly as we can. We have time deadlines, and we'll see how that all works through. But we have to get it done and get it done quickly. On the Afghan refugees, it was a very high priority. It had some good Republican support, but unfortunately the Republican leadership blocked it. These are people who risked their lives for our soldiers and for our country, and we should be rewarded. In the past, in previous engagements, we always did this and allowed them all their rights. But we didn't do it this time. We're going to keep fighting for it. Manu.
How is it in a functional process to drop a 4,100-page bill this morning, expect to vote on it tomorrow? Well, most of Congress hasn't had a chance to review this.
Look, the bill has been carefully worked on by the Appropriations Committee for a very, very long time. Most of the provisions of the bill were well known weeks and weeks and weeks in advance. And getting this bill done for the American people, which really matters, is the most important thing. Yes?
Did Democrats Democrats miss an opportunity to deal with the debt ceiling in the lame duck while you still have unified Democratic control and maybe could use reconciliation?
Our view is it should be done in a bipartisan way, and we will be working in the next Congress to get that done.
Leader Schumer, given Kevin McCarthy's strong opposition to this bill, do you see this as perhaps the last omnibus of President Biden's first term? And how do you expect to deal with government funding and the debt limit?
Look, I think that it's too early to judge what's going to happen in the House. There's so much discombobulation and disunity on different sides of the Republican caucus. We're going to, as I've mentioned before, we're going to work very hard to work with Republicans to get things done. We did, of the big 6 bills this year in a 50-50 Senate, 5 were bipartisan. Last year, one of the biggest bills, the BIF bill, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which now has some other initials. I think they keep changing these initials. It's not so. IIJA, is that what it's called? I don't know what it's called. But in any case, the BIF bipartisan bill was done that way. And we're going to keep working to get something done in a bipartisan way. Yes.
Can you talk about your relationship, to the degree that one exists, with Kevin McCarthy? You talk about this misconfabulation in the House of Representatives. You're going to be the Senate Majority Leader. He might be the...
Look, I've always gotten along with Kevin McCarthy. We don't agree on a whole lot of issues, but I try to work with anyone I can to get things done for the American people. Yes, yes.
You had a bipartisan deal already on the Safe Banking Act. Can you explain why that was left though till the lame duck and why?
Look, at the very end of the day, we had very good bipartisan support. We had hoped to get it done. I worked for months with different Republicans led by Senator Daines of Montana. But at the last minute, both Senators Toomey and McConnell opposed it. It is bipartisan. It has the support of many different groups. We're going to go back at it next year. Thank you, everybody.
It's going to be the same result. And the only people coming out on the short end are the people we say we're trying to serve. Borrowing money from your kids and grandkids without putting any forethought into what you're spending is a terrible business plan. My friends up here will share some of their ideas on what's wrong with the process as well.
So, Randy, you wrote the bill. Why don't you go first?
I brought with me the Omni, 4,155 pages. When was it produced? In the dead of the night, 1:30 in the morning when it was released. Now, people argue that it's conservatives' fault. You don't have the Christmas spirit. Somehow you're holding up government. Well, whose job is it to produce this? The people in charge of spending, the people in charge of both of the parties. When did they know that this would be necessary? Well, it's in the law, September 30th. You got 9 months, almost 10 months, to produce a plan, to have a spending plan. They weren't ready on September 30th, so they voted themselves 90 more days. They weren't ready last week either, so they voted themselves another week. And now we have it at 1:30 in the morning this morning. But what's the clamor? The clamor is to vote. Vote now. Let's get it done. Why are you standing in the way of spending? Well, the real question is this. What is more dangerous? What is more dangerous to the country? $1.1 trillion in new debt, or as Republican leadership likes to say, oh, but it's a win. It's a big win. We're getting $45 billion for the military. So which is more important? Which threatens the country more? Are we at risk for being invaded by a foreign power if we don't put $45 billion into the military? Or are we more at risk by adding to a $31 trillion debt? I think the greatest risk to our national security is our debt. The process stinks. It's an abomination. It's a no-good, rotten way to run your government. $6 trillion entity, and they want 24 hours to process this, and then they want to go forward. I will be demanding 2 amendments. One, that this goes against the budget rules. The pay-go rules say you can't do this. You can't have all this new spending unless it's offset. We will also be demanding that the pay-go rules are increased. Instead of taking 60 votes to evade the rules, we're going to ask that it be a 2/3 vote to evade the rules. The American people don't want this. They're sick and tired of it. They're paying for it through the nose with inflation. Adding $1 trillion to the deficit will simply fuel the fires that are consuming our wages and consuming our retirement plans. It's a terrible system. Someone needs to stand up. We're standing up, and we're going to say no.
Thank you, Rand. Thanks for bringing the prop. I think what I found most disconcerting about this discussion, this debate, this process, is the whistling past the graveyard nature of it. We're talking about this is a big win in terms of conservatism, and for Republicans that we're getting a greater increase in defense spending. One of the things I've been pointing out, because of the massive inflation, because a dollar that we all held at the start of the Biden administration is worth less than 88 cents, the $858 billion we're getting on defense is literally worth only $754 billion in January of 2021 dollars. That's how much inflation has eroded the value of all spending, including defense spending. But the fact that nobody talks about the numbers, I mean, in total, the macro numbers. I thought it was interesting last week as I was asking my colleagues and quite honestly a number of you reporters, just the simple question, do you know how much we spent last year? And the blank stares I got from most people. Now, I'm still asking that question. I think people are getting a little educated, so that now they're starting to answer it. But the answer is $6.3 trillion last year. To compare that to before the pandemic in 2019, we spent $4.4 trillion. The discretionary side, less than 70% of what we spend is going to be $1.65 trillion, which is 23% more than the $1.3 trillion we spent in 2019. I mean, again, that is a massive increase, and my concern is overall federal spending will probably be about $6 trillion for the fiscal year. Again, $6 trillion versus a baseline just 3 years ago of $4.4 trillion. Something's got to give. At some point, we do hit a debt crisis, and I would argue, 7% plus inflation, with really no ending in sight, is certainly an inkling of what that debt crisis is going to look like and how that is going to devastate Americans. In all areas of the income spectrum, but particularly people at the lower end who spend their money, their disposable income, on things that have actually risen at a higher rate than 7%. The amendment that I'll be asking for, and that Senator Schumer agreed to last week, would be to eliminate all the earmarks. And I've got my own prop here. So that's the entire omnibus. This is the language on earmarks only. There are, let me get the exact numbers, $9.8 billion worth of earmarks, thousands of individual projects here, both Democrat and Republican. It's interesting to note on the Republican side, we actually have a conference resolution that we don't support earmarks. Well, we're supporting over $4 billion worth. Democrats are getting $5.4 billion worth of earmarks. This is the gateway drug to the massive deficit spending, to the mortgaging of our children's future. It has to stop, which is why I'm going to offer an amendment to eliminate all those earmarks in this massive omnibus spending bill. Senator Lee.
This monstrous spending bill clocks in at 4,155 pages. It was released in the middle of the night. We've had it for only a few hours. And now we're being told Congress needs to vote on and pass this thing on an expedited basis. Some are saying, within the next 48 to 72 hours. By doing that, they're acknowledging the fact that they're treating what is fundamentally a legislative proposal. I mean, let's be serious about this. This is a handful, like 4 or 5 people in Congress wrote this. And they put it together They introduced it in the middle of the night, in the early morning hours of today. And now they're wanting to collapse all hearings, all floor debates, all discussions in earnest about this, and say you just have to pass it because this is what the process is. Well, the process is this way because time after time, you've got enough members who agree to support these things without even having voted for it. Some of our colleagues must have magical powers, powers that I can't grasp or even understand. Because one of the reasons why this works is that you've had, I think, all 50 Democrats agreeing in advance they'd support it, and you've had between 10 and 20 Republicans agreeing in advance that they would support it, even though essentially none of them have seen this. I've got friends on the Appropriations Committee, including some who were subcommittee chairs or subcommittee ranking members on there who hadn't seen it. And yet they didn't know what was in it. So magically, those 50 Democrats and those 10 to 20 Republicans who pledged their support for it, before it even existed, they somehow knew what was in it. Well, it wasn't just that they were clairvoyant. It's that they were sort of bought off piece by piece, person by person. And I don't mean bought off in the legally corrupt sense, but in the sense that it's a corrupt process. You hand out enough special favors here or there to get this or that proposal, this or that funding priority in there. You throw out 7,500 earmarks, and you're going to get a lot of people to jump on board. That isn't right. It used to be that the legislative process involved reading and debating and discussing and amending. It used to be that once a bill like this reached the floor, after it had gone through a full committee markup process, that you would still have an abundant chance on the floor to debate it and discuss it, because most people on the committee in question are not represented. Most people not on that committee have never had an opportunity by the time it reaches the floor to weigh in. So we had that. But today, it seems that we have to beg and plead and barter for any amendments, and we're made to feel guilty about it in the process. They have the audacity to hold off on this thing deliberately by design and release it in the early morning hours of December 20th, having scheduled a shutdown the day before Christmas Eve, and then tell us that it's somehow on us unless we eagerly jump onto it and read it. Why is that a problem? Well, it's a problem because, again, it's 4,155 pages long. We get desensitized to this over time. The complexity. Complexity in law is itself a subsidy. It's a corrupt subsidy that subsidizes the wealthy and the well-connected in this country. 4,155 pages long. Just put this in perspective for a minute. I speak, on average, about 120 words per minute when I speak on the Senate floor. I don't know whether that's something to be proud of or not. I don't know how that stacks up to others, but that's the rate at which I typically speak on the Senate floor. At that pace, it would take me 5 straight days. And by days, I don't mean 8-hour work days or 10 or 12-hour work days. I mean 24-hour work days. 5 straight 24-hour periods consecutively, back to back, without so much as a bathroom break. And certainly no opportunity for sleeping. Nothing other than reading. It would take 5 straight consecutive days of continuous reading at that pace in order to get through this. The Bible is a long book, and it's 1,200 pages long. And so going through this, reading through this, which the Bible's actually interesting and full of stories that you can follow, much more interesting than this. I mean, even when you get into the depths of Habakkuk, you're not dealing with stuff like this. But you'd have to read, to get through the same amount of text, you'd have to read the Bible 3.5 times during that same period and be able to comprehend it. And unlike the Bible, this stuff can't be really read on its face and understood. It takes cross-referencing to understand all of that. I've got a number of friends who have detailed a number of the more absurd examples of the carve-outs that they've used to barter and thereby procure the advance votes of a number of my colleagues, some of which are absurd. A few of them were identified by my friend Scott Parkinson. Curiously, there were a few members whose names appeared quite repeatedly and prominently in these. For example, you'll be very pleased to know that in this, we've got the federal building on 7th Street in San Francisco that's named for Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi. Then you've got our Senate Appropriations Committee Chair, Patrick Leahy. What was just the Lake Champlain Basin Program is now going to be the Patrick Leahy Lake Champlain Basin Program. And we're also stuffing an additional $35 million a year, each year, every year between now and 2027. I'm sure that's just a coincidence that he's the Approps Chair, and that's also on there. Oh, also, our colleague, Richard Shelby from Alabama. I guess there are still a few things in Alabama that have yet to be named after Richard Shelby. He's got some in there as well, including an FBI arsenal building down there. If you like presidential museums, you'll love this one because we've got $6 million for the Ulysses S. Grant Museum. It needs an overhaul to the tune of $6 million. One of my favorites might be the $1.7 billion that goes to transportation structures and infrastructure developed specifically to combat climate change. That's in there too. Some Republicans are trying to call it a big win. I'm sorry, I have a hard time calling that a big win. When you unite all 50 Democrats and sharply divide Republicans, getting, I don't know, probably 10 to 20 votes to support this, I don't understand how that's a big win for Republicans, especially right after we've just had an election. And control of the House has now shifted from Democrats to Republicans. I don't understand that math. I don't understand that logic, but it's not right. You know, there's something more to this. This isn't just about the balance of this fiscal year. It's that, and we're giving them way too much on that. But it's this then becomes the norm. This resets the defaults, such that if, heaven forbid, we get to the end of this fiscal year and there is an agreement on a series of spending bills or one big one or whatever, we may, for a period of time, perhaps a long period of time, end up operating on the basis of a continuing resolution. Guess which levels this then extends? These higher levels. Ladies and gentlemen, this is why we're $31 trillion in debt, because of stuff like this. It's making the American people poorer. It's destabilizing our economy. It's making it so that the average Utah family now finds life unaffordable, having to shell out an additional $1,000 a month every single month for their basic monthly necessities. This is wrong. It's got to stop, and it will not stop until members of Congress, including U.S. senators elected as Republicans, committed to some semblance of fiscal conservatism, refuse to vote for bills that they have not read, that they do not understand, that are cobbled together and that impoverish the American people. They do a lot of good, but most of that good is for special interests and for the popularity of the politicians who vote for these things, who will get a big bump for the moment when they get praised by the public and by the media and by the special interests for passing this thing. It needs to stop.
Before I ran for governor of Florida back in 2010, I'd been in business all my life. And I didn't start out with money, so I had to go to banks and I had to go to investors to start the companies I started. So if I went to a bank and I said to them, give me a bunch of money, and here's the documents you have to sign, and you'll have 24 hours to read them, what do you think the chances I would have gotten any money? I wouldn't have gotten any money. If I went to an investor and said, this is what you have to sign, you've got 24, 48 hours to read it, but you have to sign it, and I want your money, you think they'd give it to me? No, they wouldn't have given it to me. So if you went out and hired somebody to help you buy something, and a lawyer, or you had a financial planner helping you review an investment, and they said, look, I don't have time to read it, but you should just sign it, and maybe afterwards we'll know what's in it, you would fire the lawyer or you would fire the financial planner. Nobody leads their personal life the way our federal government is operating. We get a bill that should have happened before September, that we all should have had plenty of time to review. We get a bill at 1:28 in the morning that's 3 times the size of the Bible. The Bible might have a lot of interesting stories, but I've tried to read the entire Bible straight through a bunch of times. It's hard. Think about it. We'd have to read it over 3 times between now and Friday night. If you wanted to say, I'm going to read every page, you'd have to read from 8 o'clock this morning, 24 hours a day, through Friday night. You'd have to read 47 pages an hour. I'd fall asleep. I think most people would fall asleep being able to do that, and you wouldn't be able to comprehend it. So 4,155 pages, 7,500 earmarks, right? And how many people, when you go back home and you say, I supported 7,500 earmarks for things that they would not spend their money on, that people would say, oh, you should reelect those people. We can't keep doing this. And I've been up here 4 years. We're going to keep doing this. I don't know why is something going to change? The Democrats have been able to do this in the past. They're going to do it next year. We'll be in the exact same position next year because we have allowed them to get away with it. This has got to stop. We've got to say, we came up here to be fiscally responsible and watch your money. If you look at the inflation that's happening right now, inflation is caused by one thing: reckless government spending. $31 trillion of the debt. If anybody's buying a new house and you look at the mortgage has gone up to over 6%, okay, that's caused because we have $31.5 trillion worth of debt and we keep running deficits. If you look at the inflation, which has been about 14% since Biden got elected, it's because we haven't lived within our means. So if we care about Americans, we've got to start acting responsibly. Giving us a bill at 1:28 in the morning that's over 4,000 pages that nobody will have the opportunity to read, that we'll have no idea what's in it, is not the way to run your personal life, your business life, or your government. This has to stop.
Any questions?
Hey, Senators, thanks for taking questions, by the way. There's a couple non-germane things in there, one of which is on page 1947, which is the Electoral Count Act. The other one's on page 2002, and that's the ban on TikTok on federal phones. That's actually a Republican idea. First, does anybody have any opinions on the TikTok provision in this spending bill?
I support not having TikTok on government phones, and I think every parent ought to start looking at whether they should, their children should be able to use TikTok. TikTok is absolutely controlled by the Communist Party of China. It's destabilizing. It's not good for our children. I think we ought to have to look at how do we do any business with Communist China, and I think this is one example.
Ask about the Electoral Count Act, pretty big.
Yeah, well, so let me, rather than comment specifically on what's included in here, let's talk about why it was included. This is supposedly a must-pass piece of legislation. And so you will see those types of bills included in these types of piece of legislation without debate, not having gone through the committee, but it just gets stuck together. Again, it's a horrible way of legislating. It's a horrible way of running this country. And that's what we're saying here. This has to stop. We can't continue this way. So, whether you're for a particular piece of legislation or not, this isn't the way it should be passed.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Senators. Leader McCarthy is threatening to block legislation next year from any Senate Republican who supports the omnibus. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, I think what we ought to do is we ought to be supporting the Republican in the House. The Republicans of the House have said they do not want this bill. They want to have the opportunity to pass a spending bill when they're in control. Would you rather have, if you think about it, when you're buying a company, you're doing any document, you want to be the one that writes the document. The same with this. We should have Republicans write this bill rather than Democrats write this bill. This is a Pelosi-Schumer bill, not a McCarthy Republican leadership bill in the Senate. So I support letting the Republican House do this. And by the way, in the bill, they have disaster funding for Florida. We had a hurricane. I've been asking for support, and actually, first off, asking for the number we need out of FEMA. Haven't gotten it. I've asked for a bill on disaster relief. Haven't gotten it because they want to put it in a bill that shouldn't be in. So I'm going to demand a separate vote for disaster relief.
And once we get through this, they ought to set the example next year on how you do it. They need to get to work on all of these appropriation bills in a timely manner and set the example for how it's going to be done. If not, there'll be some of us here holding them accountable, and McCarthy has said he will do that. I hope he does.
Hey, go ahead. To that point, following up on that, this appears to be a splintering in the Republican Party for both sides. Is it problematic to you guys, and especially your effectiveness, if you have a House Republican leader who isn't on the same page as the Senate Republican leader?
Well, I think each of us represent our states. All right, and I was very clear when I ran, and I was very clear when I was governor. I mean, I balanced the budget. I mean, people up here say, "Oh, you'll never support a spending bill." Well, if you sign a budget every year, I signed a budget spending bill every year as governor. We negotiate with the legislature, and I did it, and I also did vetoes. So what we need to do up here is have something where we go through a process. But right now, I think we ought to be supporting the Republicans in the House. We shouldn't be passing something at the end of the year. It's just for helping Pelosi and Schumer. That's all we're doing.
Have you talked directly to McCarthy about this at all?
I have.
Any of you guys?
Many times.
And
I've talked to him an hour ago, talked to him last night, I've talked to him a lot, and he's, yeah.
Sorry.
Yep. Look, I don't ever want to speak for someone who's not present, especially when they can speak for themselves, but to answer your question, yes, I've spoken to him many times, and he and I have similar concerns that we've expressed publicly, and I think he's got a legitimate one. I mean, one of the reasons for this, I've shared this with you before, or at least with most of you, but since 1954, control of the House has shifted only 5 times. Each time during a midterm election, and at no point in 0 of those 5 switches did you have the lame duck Congress during a lame duck session passing a comprehensive spending bill during the lame duck period. Shouldn't happen now. And anyway, to answer your original question, yeah, I do think this is harmful to Republicans. We've got a Republican leader in the House and a Republican leader in the Senate, and they are taking diametrically opposed positions here. And I'm with McCarthy on this one.
Senator Lee, a question on strategy. On Twitter, you suggested you might deny UC to expedite this. Is that your plan? Are we going to go over the shutdown deadline?
Yeah. Under no circumstances are we going to go over the shutdown deadline. And by the way, I trust and would hope that when you ask my colleagues who are proponents of this bill, that you would ask them the same question. Keep in mind, they are the ones who held control of this. They are the ones who, feigning the inability to get it done any sooner, dropped this on us just days before Christmas, having artificially contrived a shutdown threat that would come to full maturity at midnight the day before Christmas Eve. So I hope you'll ask them that same question. But no, as I look at the timing of this with the Senate rules, even if there were no time agreement at all, this one's not going to create a shutdown. Whether there's a shutdown as a result of House action, I don't know. But assuming that the Senate ends up passing this, there's no conceivable universe in which it eats into that or requires another extension on our end. But this is part of the problem, though. They contrived the shutdown threat by setting up a shutdown right before Christmas. And they do this year after year. Shame on them, but shame on us for falling for it over and over again.
I'd like to just answer that question as well. Unfortunately, this is misreported all of the time. Every day in the hallway, they say, are you going to hold up this spending bill? Are you going to be the fly in the ointment that allows government to shut down? Instead of the honest answer, when did they learn that there was a deadline for spending, and why didn't they meet the deadline? The deadline for spending is September 30th. Every year, they didn't meet it. They were given 90 additional days. And last week, that deadline came, and they didn't meet it. They were given an additional week, and with that week mostly gone, they come forward and say, and then all of a sudden, it's conservatives' fault for blocking this? No, they know the rules. The rules of the Senate haven't changed. It takes a week to pass a bill in the Senate. And people say, are you going to hold it up? No, it's like, am I going to grant a speeding up of the bill, an expediting of the bill? This is about us doing a special favor to the people who are bankrupting the country. They're in charge. They know the deadlines. It is all on them. These people I would not put in charge of a Minute Mart and 3 gas stations, much less a $6 trillion economy. They know the deadlines. They fail every year. They bring it to Christmas, and then they blame conservatives. And the thing is, people say, well, you won't vote for a spending bill. Sure, I will. I'll vote for 99% of what we spent last year. You do that for 5 years, and you'll just about balance your budget.
Senator, sorry, can I follow up on that?
Sure.
You say that they're in charge of the timing on this, but to a degree, you have a little bit of dictate over the timing of this. So are you going to do what you can do, which is use the time that's allotted for this to
We have zero power over the timing of when the bills are presented. We weren't participating in writing the bill. It was done by about 3 or 4 people in leadership and appropriations. So we really don't control the timing. The timing is also set by the Senate rules. Bills take about a week. Those are the rules. You can have exceptions to the rules if everybody gets together. So if you want to declare that America's great and we should celebrate the 4th of July, I'm all for expediting that. But for expediting $1 trillion in deficit, I ran for office because I think we're destroying our country. We're going to destroy our currency. Why would I jump up and down and say, oh, well, let me please get out of the way so you can further bankrupt the country? But it really is absolutely 100% their responsibility. They control the legislative calendar. Senator Schumer controls the day-to-day. No one else can bring a bill forward. The majority leader has all that power. But I'm pretty ecumenical on the blame. When Republicans were in charge of the House, the Senate, and the presidency, they continued to add trillions of dollars to debt, even when we controlled the calendar. But when that happened, I wasn't in charge of the calendar, and the same thing happened. They missed the deadlines, bumped it up against a holiday, and then blamed conservatives. I'm sick of taking it.
Senator Paul, then would you oppose expediting this? Do you think this will go over the deadline?
We haven't decided.
Look, the bill's 4,155 pages long. We got it a few hours ago.
Read the bill.
So I find it offensive when colleagues suggest they deliberately contrive this shutdown threat. They are extorting us and the American people, using the American people and the legitimate fears they have as bait. And then they drop it on us at the last possible moment when they could plausibly do it. And then within hours, are you done yet? Are you done yet? Are you finished? Are you ready to give us consent? That is the height of presumptuousness. This is legislative barbarism. This is extortion, and it's wrong. So it's, I'm sorry, that is way too soon to be asking us how quickly we're going to jump to expedite their process from which they excluded every single one of us and 330 million Americans. That's wrong.
Senator, why do you think the 5 of you have had a couple press conferences here in the last couple of weeks. Do you feel as though your position on this is the minority of the minority? Why are there only 5 Republicans having this conversation?
That's a darn good question. Because last time I checked, every Republican runs year after year on a platform that includes fiscal conservatism. That's sort of the one uniter. We represent lots of different states with lots of different idiosyncrasies. But the one thing that I think unites us all is we've all run as fiscal conservatives. I wish there were more of us at this press conference. I know there are more of us who feel this way, who for whatever reason just couldn't make it today. But I'd love to have more. Because, look, the fact is this. Every one of us can find something in here that we like. Every one of us can identify some worthy, deserving beneficiaries who will benefit from this legislation. That is not the question. The question is viewed as a totality. Is this right? Not only do I think it's not right, but I also know that they can't know that it's right after seeing it for like 6 minutes.
So the important thing is look at the final vote when we get to it. There'll be 30 or 35, I think, that are going to vote against this. And if it's not for folks like us speaking up, you may not get that many. And this is just a start. The biggest thing you need to take away from this is we've now got a group of 6 or 7. It used to be 2 or 3 of us. And that's because more and more the American public's coming our way, even more within our own conference. They're just not going to get up here. But we're going to do this not only here when you are up against the gun, we're going to do this every week out of the year going forward to point this out. And we've never really done that before. We're not going to just take these moments when you have to get up and you get this laid in your lap. We know what that's going to end up doing. It's going to go through. But going through this next year, we've had people speak up in our own conference, I'm not going to say who, that are talking about real reform to the process. A few of them that'll even probably vote for it, but that know that it's a broken system.
Is there like a name for this group? Like, are you guys coming, if you're doing this every week then?
Well, on my card, we call it, our office does the Breakfast Club, because we get together at about 9 o'clock now on every Tuesday. With no breakfast. We're fiscal conservatives.
I call it a group with no name.
Thank you.
A group that isn't a group.
Senator Ron, if you have us to do this and you want to read it and you want to know what's in it and you can take the time, what's the argument for not doing these things?
Yeah, I'll say
Take the time to do it. Why not?
Well, because it's physically impossible to do that in a responsible way in the time they've given us. So, well, who knows what might happen between now and then. But we're not going to win this war with dramatics right before the deadline occurs. I don't think that's good for us. We're going to build solidly through this next year on trying to reform the system in general. That's why I came here. When it comes to this is just a moment where you get forced into that corner every year since I've been here. And got to remember, without doing any budgets, I'm the only one up here that's an appropriator. And I can tell you, there's been no discussion among us appropriators, period. I'm a ranking member of one of the subcommittees, and we don't talk about it. That's not a good way to run it.
Question.
One more, I got to go then.
You weren't in Congress when last time Republicans controlled both the presidency and Congress, but whenever we bring the numbers up to Democrats, they like to point out that when Republicans had the chambers as well as the presidency, this issue of national debt and the deficit was not addressed, and in some ways it got...
I'll just cut to the chase. We're hypocrites there, because a lot of this has occurred under both administrations. And it's due to the fact that they roll us because they don't care how much money we spend. I've said it before, this is their cathedral and growth business all wrapped into one. Never taken Finance 101 or know much about macroeconomics. They're unapologetic about it. We claim to be fiscal conservatives and accommodate it year after year. I place more blame on us than I do them in the sense that we say we're against it, but then we go along with it.
Okay.
You have the camera, Jackson.
All right, where shall we go?
You have your camera?
Yeah, of course.
That's it.